The New Orleans Saints are expected to get rookie wide receiver Chris Olave back this Thursday, and it's already easy to pick out where he'll have an immediate impact. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the right candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. On today's episode, we're going to be joined by Doug Mouton of WWL TV later on to talk about whether or not the New Orleans Saints are going to be able to right the ship before the clock runs out. But we're also going to be taking a look at a couple of big returns for the New Orleans Saints, including a couple of rookies. Rookie cornerback Allante Taylor, designated to return off of injured reserve. But first, we're going to dive into the return of rookie wide receiver Chris Olave, whose impact is already evident in terms of the way that he makes a New Orleans Saints offense better when he's on the field. Let's look back just at last week against the Cincinnati Bengals. Actually, before we do that, let's get the context here. Chris Olave missed last week's game after suffering a concussion on a touchdown catch that he had in the end zone. He was kind of tackled over, kind of suplexed over, and landed kind of on the head and neck area. Definitely, like he told us that he was like definitely lost consciousness, blacked out for a second and everything, but did say that the concussion that he had in college was much worse than that one. So good thing. But he has been kind of working his way back. He effectively cleared all of the concussion protocols, just needed to be, passed off or whatever by the independent neurologist. Everybody, listen to me trying to be medical. Medical is not really my thing. But anyway, cleared now 100%. He expects to be back, and it seems that everyone expects to be back on Thursday. So now let's talk about the impact of getting him back. So we'll do that by going back to last week's game. What was the biggest struggle for the New Orleans Saints offense against the Cincinnati Bengals? It was red zone production. They were 1 of 5 in the red zone, despite the fact, and that means 1 of 5 as in converting touchdowns. They actually walked away with points all 5 times, which is great, but in terms of getting touchdowns, only 1 out of the 5 red zone possessions that they had actually ended in the end zone. That is very different than the New Orleans Saints that we've seen so far this season through the first 6 weeks, where they were 80% going into the red zone, walking away with touchdowns. What was one of the big differences between the previous 6 games and that game against the Cincinnati Bengals? Well, a couple different things. You didn't have Michael Thomas, who has 3 touchdown catches on 3 targets, all 3 of his touchdown catches on the season, all coming in the red zone. But you also didn't have Chris Olave, who has been a go-to in the red zone as well. He's been targeted 5 times in the passing game in the red zone, caught 4 of those for 38 total yards, and both of his touchdowns were also red zone touchdowns as well. He also converted that 2-point try that we saw earlier on in the season, which is effectively another red zone rep. Not entirely the same, right? We're talking about 1 play versus an entire possession, but you get the idea, right? Like you would run that play in the red zone if you're on the 2-yard line as well. So you can already see where the impact for Chris Olave, or for the Saints, awaits with Chris Olave coming back expected on Thursday. So the one thing that the Saints did do well against the Cincinnati Bengals that we weren't sure they were going to be able to do well, especially with their top 3 wide receivers out for that game, is that they actually put together drives and moved between the 20s very well, but stalled out once they got into that red area within the 20-yard line of the end zone. They had 3 different plays in which 3 straight drives actually in which they strung together 14 play drives. Did not expect them to be able to do that this past week, but they were able to. So if Olave is now added to that lineup, not only does he help you move the ball between the 20s as the most targeted, most catches, and player with the most receiving yards as well, second in touchdowns, on top of that, receiving touchdowns at least, hopefully then he's going to be able to help them cap off some of those drives when they get into the red zone. And let's not short Alvin Kamara as well, who should be getting more usage in the red zone. He's been targeted only 6 times in the red zone so far for only 8 yards, and he's run the ball 5 times while in the red zone, but for only 6 yards. So getting him going and finding more success from him within the red zone, which has kind of been the, let's say, kind of calling card of his big touchdown years where he's had 15, 17 touchdowns, all of that. 13 or so of those coming in the red zone was not out of the ordinary for Alvin Kamara. So getting him going and also now having Chris Olave back, you should be more productive in the red zone area this week. You just have to get there now. And you're going up against the NFL's number 7 rushing defense in the Arizona Cardinals, but the Cincinnati Bengals were number 7 as well with the going up before they went up against the Saints. The Saints still ran for over 220 yards on them. So that's part of why they've been able to move the ball so efficiently between the 20s. Now you got to finish within the 20s, and getting rookie sensation Chris Olave back should help you do that. All right. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints are looking at getting another rookie back, this time second-round rookie, cornerback Allante Taylor. Could we potentially see him on Thursday, and why you might not only see him, but you might see him early and often once he's back? We'll get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get there, I want to tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs is the absolute best place for you to go if you're looking for either a job or you're looking to hire someone for a job. Let's say that you're a small business and you're looking at expanding your team. Well, LinkedIn Jobs is the best way to do that. You're able to put together simple tools like screening questions so that it's easier for you to focus on the candidates that have the requisite skills and experience that you're looking for, making sure that you can talk to those folks that you not only have a good chance of enjoying the interview with, but also have a good chance of hiring as well. It's why small businesses have ranked LinkedIn Jobs number 1 when it comes to delivering quality hires versus all of the leading competitors out there. LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available all over the place and here on YouTube as well. So if this is your first time catching the show, really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope that you'll stick around. If you've been a long-time listener or viewer, thank you very much as well. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, all of that good stuff for Monday through Friday content on your New Orleans Saints. And Monday through Friday feels a little bit different this time around because we have a Thursday night game for the New Orleans Saints this week. We've already spoken about how Chris Olave coming back could potentially have an impact, but he's not the only rookie set to return soon. I'm not going to say that Alontae Taylor, the cornerback that the Saints drafted in the second round of this past year's NFL draft out of Tennessee, almost at Tulane, because we're all thinking about Roll Wave right now, homecoming on the way. They're ranked. Everything's going great for them. For Alontae Taylor, though, he's somebody that was dealing with, a knee injury, ended up going on injured reserve after week 2, actually looked pretty good in week 2. And one of the things that Dennis Allen said about him was that if he can remain healthy, they have a role for him. They like what it is that he can do. So we got a little bit of a glimpse of that. Alontae Taylor was back at practice this week. We saw him out there on Tuesday. Remember, the Saints didn't actually practice on Monday. It was just an estimated practice report. And we spoke to him afterwards, and one of the things that he spoke about was that not only was he back, but he got some first-team reps as well. And that's important because that's why I say that not only is there a possibility that we see Alontae Taylor here soon, but that you see him early and often because he could be the starting corner opposite of Paulson Adebo, opposite of Bradley Roby, while Marshon Lattimore is out. Remember, the Saints will not have Marshon Lattimore going into this Thursday night game against the Cardinals. Adebo, I'll be honest with you, looked limited on Tuesday. He was kind of just off to the side. So I have to see whether or not he's going to play. And even if he does, getting Alontae Taylor starting opposite Paulson Adebo helps you out because Chris Harris did not do a great job in the slot this past week. I believe it was, I think I still have the stats here somewhere. He allowed 9 catches on 9 targets for 79 yards. Not great, Bob. So if you get the opportunity to bounce Bradley Roby back in the slot and then rotate Bradley Roby and Justin Evans in the slot where Justin Evans has performed very well, then I think that's another benefit that you get from having Alontae Taylor over on the outside. So while the slot suffered, you could potentially get help there by putting Alontae Taylor on the outside, which is where he spent like the majority of his collegiate experience. I've seen some folks potentially suggesting to move him back on the inside as well. You could do that. I believe it was only like 13% of his snaps, maybe even less than that he played in college in the slot. So he doesn't have a lot of slot experience. The Saints did work him out there, though, and they certainly see the versatility that they could maximize with him. But I think if you want to maximize what it is that he does well as a strong, physical, and ball skill oriented type of corner, you put him on the outside and you let him go with the big guns, right? And if you can have Paulson Adebo opposite him, maybe helps Paulson Adebo out a little bit as well. So expect to see Allante Taylor early and often, whatever it is that he comes back, whether it be Thursday against the Cardinals or next weekend against the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to run through a couple of other updates for you here. Deonte Harty, New Orleans Saints wide receiver and return specialist, who's currently on injured reserve, casted on the right foot. Did not look like a great cast. Does not look like the best injury for him. So we'll see what sort of the status update is on that. But they put him on injured reserve, so you already know that you're not going to see him for the next 3 weeks because he was already on injured reserve for the previous week. But they also restructured his contract, which is an interesting thing to do while a player is on injured reserve. But save the Saints $1.7 million. I've seen a lot of people sort of speculating about what it is that the Saints could potentially spend that money on. Odell Beckham Jr., a trade for Cam Akers. I would entertain a trade for Joshua Kelly out of the Chargers, depending upon the severity of his knee injury, all these other things. But honestly, I think for the New Orleans Saints, this is insurance because they're already dealing with so many injuries. They have played, I believe it is the second most players so far this season already. So picking up right where they left off last week or last year in that category. So I think that this is really like insurance and then money to roll over into 2023 because the Saints don't have a lot of cap space right now. Next, Rashid Shaheed, the present New Orleans Saints wide receiver and return specialist, ready for a bigger role. We got to speak with Pete Carmichael yesterday. Pete Carmichael mentioning or kind of alluding to the idea of Rashid Shaheed getting some more opportunities. There were only so many packages that he was game planned into last week. Now he's got another week under his belt, and he feels ready for a bigger role as well. Told me that he is very comfortable now with the playbook, that it feels better now that he's gone out there and executed some of it as well. We know the New Orleans Saints have a dense playbook, so sometimes getting on the field and getting the reps is such a big piece. So he's ready for as big a role as the New Orleans Saints will allow him to have, and I think the New Orleans Saints will wisely utilize him a little bit more this week than they did last week because A, they can, and B, they should, right? Also, just a fun note, Shaheed also told me that he's got 18 family members, friends, stuff like that, going to the Thursday night football game in Phoenix, not a far cry from the San Diego area where a lot of his people are from. So really cool stuff there. So hopefully he'll get an opportunity to march into the end zone again. Said he had a touchdown celebration prepared, but when he got into the end zone, just kind of threw the ball up in the air. But he did keep the ball, did keep the jersey, so good for him. Andrus Peat's injury, not as bad as we expected. A pec strain as opposed to a pec tear, which we know can be a season-ending injury or a season-threatening injury. We've seen that with him in the past, as well as with Teron Armstead, who just missed his first game last weekend with the Miami Dolphins. So basically, Andrus Peat is week to week at this point. I would say that probably means weeks to weeks based on the rhythm of what we've seen so far with Saints injuries. So I don't expect to see him on Thursday. Obviously, Calvin Throckmorton is back, though, so he should plug in at left guard, and then we'll see what happens with the Raiders on the other side. Adam Trautman's injury, also not as bad as was originally concerned. A lot of people assume that the injury happened while he went into motion. During the Cincinnati game, he was going into motion and kind of fell over. And so a lot of folks assume that that's when the injury happened, but the injury actually happened the play before, where he kind of got tabletopped and rolled up on, as he described it. Hasn't practiced so far this week, but when it comes to where he's headed, at least it's not a situation to where it was a non-contact injury that happened behind the line of scrimmage, which a lot of people assume that it was. So I think he's probably somebody else that's going to be more week to week and all that. And one more positive update for you around injuries. Finally, Trevor Penning off of the scooter at this point, and told us that he expects the boot to be off soon. So he's currently got a boot on the foot where he had the toe injury, the turf toe injury and the surgery. And so he told New Orleans media that it's going to be coming off soon. Remember that the target return for him is still early to mid-November. I'd planned for late November because we've been hurt before. And so we'll see exactly what it is that actually allows for his recovery time in terms of when he'll be able to be out there. But it's good news, right? So you would expect Trevor Penning to maybe be back at practice early to mid-November, and then maybe in action late November, early December. So good thing for the New Orleans Saints there, along with Adam Trautman and Andrus Peat, not long-term injuries. And hopefully you see other guys like Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, Marshon Lattimore, and even Jameis Winston returning against Las Vegas Raiders after the sort of mini bye that happens with the Thursday night game. All right, up next, what will it take for the New Orleans Saints to win in Glendale tomorrow? Doug Mouton of WWL TV is here to help us break it all down. We're going to get to that here in just a second. But before we do, I want to tell you about our friends over at Bet Online. Right now, the New Orleans Saints they are 1-point underdogs on the road, going up against the Arizona Cardinals on prime time. That usually actually shapes up pretty well for the New Orleans Saints. But we know this year's been a little bit weird for them, for sure. So if you want to get in on those odds, maybe over under, maybe you want to look at maybe some of the things that are centering around the players, or maybe you're interested more in NBA odds right now with the New Orleans Pelicans tipping off tonight and all of that as well. You can find it all, including MLB, NHL, college football, college basketball on the way, and so much more over at Bet Online. You can find it on your mobile device or your laptop. Just head over to Bet Online today, where the game starts. All right, everybody, we are continuing on with this episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Today, we are joined as we get WWL Wednesdays back on the map. It's Doug Mouton at DMouton, WWL Sports Director over at WWL. Always a pleasure to be able to see you. Now I get to see you even more and more all the time, but now grateful to have the great team coming through here on the show as we establish our rhythm here for the season here in week 6, week 7.
Yeah,
but
right.
Hey, we found it. And hopefully the New Orleans Saints can find their rhythm here in week 7 as well. And a big return for them expected this week in Chris Olave that should help them be able to do that, don't you think?
Yeah, look, maybe the best thing about Chris Olave, as this team runs the ball exceptionally well the last couple of weeks, Chris Olave is the one guy, maybe more so than anybody else in this roster, that can keep the opposing team honest. You put Chris Olave out there, and they have to play him honestly. And it does open things up in a big way. It helps the running game, even though he's not going to be the best blocker as a wideout. Right. He is going to open up the running game by just being available and just being out there. And then obviously on third down situations, which the Saints were not bad at, hit 47% of third downs, and a bunch of that was Andy Dalton hitting passes. And Chris Olave helps across the board. Look, we've all seen it. The rookie of the month for the first month of the season. He's a terrific player. He's everything we thought he would be. And getting him back is huge for a team without Mike Thomas and Jarvis Landry.
And so him as a fantastic route runner, as the most targeted player, targeted receiver on the team, most receptions, your receiving yardage leader as well. You have to imagine that him and his route running prowess in particular are going to be massively beneficial in the red zone, where the Saints struggled last week, 1 of 5.
Yeah, the red zone was just terrible. And you're right. Look, it was better with Olave. And the funny thing about the Saints, as bad as they were in the red zone, that was not a problem before this past week. They were hitting 80%. And even after this past week, they're still hitting 65% touchdowns in the red zone. They're still 13 of 20 getting there. And yeah, look, Olave was a big part of that. He had the red zone touchdown in London, which was huge. Olave, terrific route runner. Yes, he keeps everything honest. You have to play him different. Third and short, he can make moves and get things done. Getting him back, yeah, it's big across the board. But yes, it should definitely help in the red zone.
And then over on the opposite side of the ball, we see another rookie being designated to return from injured reserve, cornerback Allante Taylor out of Tennessee. We only got to see a very small sample size of him week 2 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but you have to imagine that regardless, having him available potentially as early as this Thursday, but even just beyond, with all of the injuries that the Saints have already faced so far this season, that having that quality depth will make a difference for them down the stretch.
Yeah, look, he told us today that he was running with the ones today, and he absolutely could be available Thursday. Look, Allante Taylor was a guy early in training camp, actually pre-training camp. I'm talking about rookie minicamp, was a guy that, for me, was one of my big wow players of the early part of the summer. I thought he looked terrific. He's got great size for corner, and he just really played well. In training camp, look, you didn't see as much of it once it was around the veterans. But I think I think Allante Taylor has a huge upside, and I can't wait to see him play, because everything I saw in the summer pointed to a guy that can play. Obviously, we're going to see it. The Saints need to throw him in there more than maybe they'd like to at this point because of injuries. No Lattimore and a Debo banged up, but I think Allante Taylor can play, and I am really anxious to see how he plays. And I do think there's a good chance he plays Thursday.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense if he did, and certainly would be a huge boost for them. Cody Burns, New Orleans Saints wide receiver coach, called him during the rookie minis and OTAs public enemy number one in one-on-ones. So that physical trait that the New Orleans Saints really like.
Yeah. He's big and he's bigger than you think, and he plays bigger than his numbers. And you watch the tape on him from college, and he looked big, but man, in training camp, he looked like a big force on the outside. We all in this office were really impressed with him. I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar on day one, but I absolutely think he's got potential, and I'd love to see him out there. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, the Saints defense can certainly use that little bit of a boost, even just in the tackling game. 10 missed tackles against the Cincinnati Bengals. That seems to have been maybe the biggest issue for this New Orleans Saints defense over the course of the season. But you feel like maybe if they get that corrected and then maybe start to turn the ball over a little bit more, we're talking about a different defense by that point?
Yeah, look, I mean, the defense has been the enigma right now. They are not the unit we thought they would be. I mean, that's simply put. I mean, 28th in scoring defense. I think it's 23rd in takeaways, 19th in sacks. All of the defensive numbers, all the metrics are below average at this point. And that is not what we expected. They're not affecting passers from the front four with what should be a terrific front four. I mean, look, I think Demario Davis and Pete Werner have certainly done their job, but the front end and the back end have both had problems, way more problems than I thought. I keep waiting for this unit that I know is talented to turn it around and start playing like it. We haven't seen it yet. Hopefully the light goes on. Look, Ross, here's my biggest hope going forward, because whether you want to be, super gloomy or look for hope, in the Saints' next 9 games, including this game, they play 0 teams that have winning records right now. Nobody. It's like 5 3-3s, but nobody has a winning record. There's no one that's going to overmatch the Saints in the way the Saints can't play with them. I don't think anyone in the next 9 is as good as Cincinnati was. So you should have chances to win the next 9 games that's leading up to Philadelphia. And we'll see. Will they keep the same ridiculous mistakes, like the terrible safety play against Seattle? Will they have the same mistakes, finding new ways to kill themselves, or will they start to figure it out? I tend to err on the optimistic side. I think they're going to start figuring it out. I like this team. I like this coaching staff. I think they're way better than we've seen, and I think the defense starts playing better. But maybe I'm just ridiculously optimistic for no reason. Because they haven't shown me. It's not demonstrated by evidence. I just think they will.
As far as I'm concerned, if the evidence was there, we wouldn't be talking about them needing to improve, right? The evidence would be there because they've already improved.
Right.
So we'll see how it all goes for them. But it all starts again this Thursday here in just a couple of days. What do you feel this New Orleans Saints team needs to do to get a win in Arizona?
Well, look, I mean, we said they had to stop turning it over and stop committing penalties, and they did that and still found a new way to lose in Cincinnati. Look, I think you have to keep banging the drum, and look, turnovers are obviously going to be huge. I think they have to keep running the ball, and the defense just has to play better. Just has to play better, period. I don't know how to quantify it beyond that. They have to figure out a way to affect Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's going to move around a lot. He's not going to flick it out there as fast as Joe Burrow did. So you're going to have some shots at him. You got to contain him, and you got to run the ball. And they have run the ball extremely well the last 2 weeks. They've had a lot of the formula, time of possession, win the turnover margin, win the running game battle. They, by all metrics, they should have beaten Cincinnati and didn't. So, yes, you got to run the ball, and you got to figure out a way to affect Kyler Murray more than they have affected any other quarterback. To me, that's the biggest thing, is that the quarterback rating of the opposition, the Saints are 24th in that. Every quarterback's having a good day against them. You got to stop that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how the New Orleans Saints match up against that Arizona Cardinals team and how it hopefully rights the ship for them moving forward. There's a lot of fun stuff going on here in Louisiana sports. The Pelicans are underway, Tulane's ranked, LSU's, LSU. The Saints are doing their absolute best right now. And if you want to keep up with all of it, your one-stop shop to get it done is, of course, over at WWL with Doug Mouton, Brooke Kirchhofer, and, of course, Ricardo Lecomte. Doug Mouton, you can follow on Twitter at DMoutonWWL. Doug, we appreciate you coming through.
Anytime, Ralph.
All right, family, we appreciate you joining us for another episode of Locked On Saints and for making us your first listen of the day every day. Tomorrow, make sure you come back. We'll be going through our crossover Thursday conversation with Alex Clancy of Locked On Cardinals, the biggest matchups, biggest stories, predictions, everything you need to know about this matchup. Your experts will walk you through. We appreciate you so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. But I have to recommend, too, with all of the other sports in action, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or on podcasts as well. It's one of our number one shows on the network. Definitely going to want to check it out, get you everything you need to know from the day when it comes to the sporting world in like 22 minutes. Super easy to listen to. So go and check it out. Once again, that's Locked On Sports Today or the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Appreciate you as always, making me a part of your day, a part of your routine. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.